Program started. Can I have your attention? Thank you so much. Before I get too formal about tonight, I want to read a letter that Ray Ciancaglini received this week. And I think this will start the program off quite nicely. Ray and Patty, our son is progressing well. He's on his way back and starting to practice. Please turn your cell phones off or silence them. He will not play this week, although he wanted to, but I reminded him about Ray's speech and it hit home. I said, you have to be totally healed to the best of our knowledge before you return, just like Ray stated. I told him, son, Ray doesn't want people to stop playing or boxing after a concussion. Just make a healthy and safe decision to return at the appropriate time. Thank you both for your prayers. You can mention us once in a while to the big guy upstairs. I'd be appreciative. I think that kind of sums up what so far has been a huge success to our area and to our entire state. This program is put together by a dear friend of mine who was a patient of mine, who became a friend, Ray Ciancaglini. And it would be my pleasure to thank him and Patty for really pushing forward on something that's happened in Ray's life that he feels he can go on in life educating other people about, so perhaps this doesn't happen to them. This is, to me, from what I've been aware of, a conference like tonight is like the greatest show on earth for concussion. We have, and I want to thank these individuals, but we have our senator, who I'm going to introduce shortly, Mike Mazzolio, who has pushed together the concussion management and awareness legislation, which I think is fantastic. We have Ray himself, who's a superstar, and will give us his, some personal experience tonight. We have Dr. Jeff Pizzarian from the University of Rochester, who is doing a lot in concussion management and research, who we are very grateful to have here today. Followed by Jeff Bray, who will speak to you about the re-entry into education and athletic program after concussion. Really important. It's not just about going back to sports, it's about what the mind is doing, and that's with education of our athletes and anybody who gets a concussion. It just isn't about athletes. A lot of concussions occur, you know, on the street, in the playground, and in a lot of different ways. And finally, our physical therapist, Tom Papapa, I would like to thank him for presenting his time on things that happened after the concussion that we can do to help for a meaningful and full recovery. I think this is a very unique program. I don't know if any aspects are covered completely like this in any other program anywhere else. And Ray has gone statewide now. He's gone to Buffalo, Rochester, New York City. He's gone to universities. He's gone to professional football clubs, hockey, you name it. He's out there doing it. And I say that because this is a non-for-profit organization that's been started by Ray. And you'll see in the corners of the room there and there, if you can, a donation would be very well appreciated and deserved. I'd like to thank some other really important people. The Belhurst Castle, under the direction of Dwayne and Kevin Reeder, have donated this room tonight and all the food for this event. That's huge. Okay. We are very fortunate to have them here in the Belhurst Castle and really appreciate this donation. I would also like to thank Carmen, Brennan Bain, and the entire staff at Belhurst for hosting this tonight. This is really a wonderful turnout and a great place to have an event, and I think they've done a great job setting up. I'd like to thank the University of Rochester Medical Center and particularly Erin Barry for coordinating the continued medical education for our providers tonight. If you haven't signed in and you're a provider of any sort, go ahead and sign in there, and you should get an hour of CME for Dr. Bazarian's presentation, who of course is affiliated with the URMC, and we're very glad to have him here. I'd like to thank some staff at Finger Lakes Health who have been instrumental in helping with the program development, the invitations, and getting people in their seats tonight. And that would be Kristen Smith from Community Services, Kristen Ulmer, my administrative assistant, who did a fantastic job meeting on a daily basis, not a daily basis, but almost a daily basis by email with Ray and Patty and putting this thing together. It took a lot of effort, and I really want to thank them. In addition to Carl Velasky, who's our audio-visual support tonight. Thank you, Carl. And a special thanks to Senator Zolio for coming here tonight in a busy schedule, in a busy time of year. And finally, a special thanks to Patty Ciancaglini. You're awesome. Now, before I introduce the Senator, we are going to start the salad and everything during the talks. We want to get things moving. We want to get through the talks, and we're going to have a little panel afterwards with all the speakers that are available. I know the Senator has a busy schedule and will be departing, but we'll open up a panel at the end for questions. So if you have questions, remember them. If they're not answered during the course of tonight, we'll have a question and answer period afterwards, which I think will be really beneficial. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you New York State Senator Mike Nozzolio. Senator Nozzolio is sponsor of the Concussion Management Awareness Act. He's been instrumental working closely with local activist Ray Ciancaglini of Romulus as he's fought to enact this measure into law, raise awareness of the dangers that concussions pose to young student athletes. Senator Nozzolio has been a tremendous advocate for the children and the families of our region. We are proud to have such a dedicated representative here today with us. Please join me in giving Senator Nozzolio a warm welcome.
Thank you, Doc. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Ray. It's an honor to be with you. It's an honor to have worked with you. It's an honor to be your friend. I asked a lot of people tonight around the room, what brought you here this evening? What kinds of issue motivated you? Well, there were an awful lot in the room who said, Ray asked me to come, and that was enough. And I understand that request, because I know that individual who made the request is someone we all know and love. And Ray, let's start by giving you a round of applause. You are a great senator. Now, Ray, you brought together personal, company excluded, a great array of medical professionals, those who are involved in athletics, a number of educators, a team of friends, but you must certainly have something on Dr. Bazarian. Or Dr. Bazarian has more courage than anyone I've ever met, because he's spending his wedding anniversary tonight with you. Let's give a happy anniversary to Dr. Bazarian as well. You are a dedicated medical professional, and we thank that self-sacrifice from all. I'm going to speak only for a minute or two about the issue that Ray has spent hours, months, and years on, and that's the way that our children in this state are treated when they participate in athletics and when they are involved, as Doc Feinberg said, everyday life, how the government, the health departments, the education departments, the schools, how local hospitals manage this very important issue. I'm here tonight, one who was fortunate to have played a lot of sports, and a lot of contact sports, football, lacrosse, through grade school, high school, and college, through many athletic competitions that I always said that even though I went to college and law school and graduate school, I learned more about life participating in athletics than I learned about anything in the classroom. Today, I come to you injured. For the first time ever, well, I take that back. For the first time since I had my tonsils out when I was 6 years old, I actually had an operation. And part of the reason I haven't had those kind of operations is because of my good doctor, Tim Ryan, who's here tonight. And Tim, I just want to say this publicly because they don't say it enough. Those of us who are your patients, those of us in the Central Finger Lakes who benefit from your wonderful practice that you established at great sacrifice to yourself, I just want to thank you on behalf of all of us in Seneca County and in close-knit environs for the over 30,000 patients that you serve. Thank you, Tim. For all of your achievements. I was fortunate that I did not have, that I knew of, the injuries that Ray Ciancaglini was very interested in. Of course, you all know the story. Ray was a boxer, a very successful boxer, but one who had first-hand knowledge what it's like to be hit in the head. And that knowledge was important. That experience he turned to something that was, I believe, very positive. Ray came to me a number of years ago. And it's a story about how one person can really make a difference. As a state legislator, we're hit on a variety of issues, literally thousands of issues each year. And it's difficult to give attention to every issue. But when you have an advocate who is dedicated, who is understanding, who is principled, who is focused, who wants to make things different, and who is dedicated to that objective, it was a pleasure to work with Ray in establishing the Concussion Awareness Act in New York State. That legislation, that law now, establishes important guidelines for teachers, for coaches, for those who are involved with young people to help protect our children from concussions and traumatic brain injury. The diagnosis is critically important. You never sometimes know that this even occurs. I know as a football and lacrosse player, I saw, what are those birds? What are those, the Tweeties? That you saw stars. When you're hit once in a while, but you have no idea as a kid how serious that is. And just like a young man 6 weeks ago in Western New York in a small community just south of Buffalo. He's playing football, having the time of his life, playing very well, walked off the field, and 3 days later had succumbed, had died, through a traumatic brain injury that he did not know about. This just happened 6 weeks ago. It's the kind of thing that you don't know about until it's too late. And Ray knew that. That's why this law Ray fought for and is established and is providing new guidelines, new protocols, new templates of behavior for those entrusted with our children, in particular youth sports. In no way should we denigrate school athletics. School athletics are important and an important component for young men and young women. And speaking with some of our participants here from, I don't think Pat's still here, I don't know exactly where she is, but from the William Smith College perspective, that those lacrosse players that are women are facing not as great a percentage as head injury, traumatic brain injury, but still they're facing those same problems. So it's not a problem that's exclusive just to males. It's also growing as females participate in more and more athletic endeavors. It's a question for all our students, male and female. This law that I discussed I worked very hard to achieve. But you should also know that Ray Ciancaglini made the difference. It was Ray's work that helped get this over the goal line. It's Ray's work that helped encourage other state legislators from across New York to support the effort. And at a time when you don't want to see more regulation, Ray made the case that this certainly is necessary. And it's necessary for 20 years out as it is today. I don't know how about you, but I teared up when I read the story about Jim McMahon, the former quarterback for the Chicago Bears. If you remember those football fans, he led the Chicago team to the Super Bowl in the mid-1980s. Jim McMahon was praised because he would hand the ball off, and a lot like Mike Rowland, when Mike played for the Sales, he would go, where's Mike? Is he still here? Where is he? Oh, there he is. Jim McMahon, like Mike Rowland, would hand the ball off and then go over and block others to get them out of the way. And the thing that Jim McMahon is now confronted with is that he is standing in front of his house and he doesn't know it's his. His wife is beside herself. He has gone from the highest echelons of athletics and the ability to articulate and a spokesperson and a personality to a person now, because of traumatic brain injury, cannot function. And so I thank Ray for his addressing this issue now, while there's still hope and still the chance that this injury can be prevented for our children and the adults of the future. And that New York, I'm proud to say, is first in a lot of things we don't want it to be first in, but it's first in this issue. And that's in part, large part, because of Ray Ciancaglini and the efforts of his organization, of him as an individual. I'm proud to be part of his team and very appreciative of the opportunity to be with you tonight. And thank you for your commitment on this very important issue. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Senator Zolio. That was excellent, and we really appreciate your support of Ray and the entire Finger Lakes, and your presence here tonight means a lot to all of us. Thank you. Next guy we've introduced a little bit tonight, and we're going to continue to introduce him. He's done a wonderful job as a boxer, middleweight boxer, 1966 to 1974. The injuries he's suffered have led to a condition that he wants to talk about, but he also, more importantly, he wants to talk about how we can prevent young athletes and anybody that with head injuries from developing the long-term sequela that Ray suffers from, and people like Jim McMahon and others. It's too common, and it's something that we can prevent. And I think that's the great thing about this is, you know, in medicine we often want to treat things, we want to cure them. But this is something we can prevent, which is even more important. With this, Ray has started the Second Impact. He's the founder of the Second Impact, a great organization. He has gone really a long distance here, and he keeps punching. And I'll tell you, this is a guy I can't say no to, the senator can't say no to, Dr. Zarian can't say no to. I don't think there's a person in this room that can say no to Ray. So with this, please give Ray a very warm welcome. He's
I always felt adamant about the urgent need to have a state law that was comprehensive across the board for all schools, to follow the same rules for addressing concussion awareness and management And I didn't have to look very far to get this accomplished. The man I had in mind was my very good friend, Senator Mike Mazzolio. And for many years, I experienced his genuine concern for the well-being of children. And I also knew he had a great rapport and ability to reach across the aisle with his colleagues in Albany. Senator Mazzolio worked tirelessly with the New York State Senate to get passed into law the current 2011 Concussion Management Awareness Act. And this law drastically reduces the chance that a concussed athlete will be mistakenly overlooked. And many other states have used this law as a blueprint to enact their own legislation. I can't thank Senator Mazzolio enough. And I'm so lucky to have him as a friend. And we are so lucky to have him work in our corner in Albany. Thank you, Senator. Every successful boxer knows the importance of having a knowledgeable and dedicated staff working their corner. And the great Muhammad Ali was guided by legendary trainers Angelo Dundee and Bundini Brown. And I can honestly say that with the caliber of support that I have working the second impact corner, there isn't any fight we can't win. And a very gracious thank you to Dwayne and Kevin Reeder and Carmen Brennan Bain of the Belhurst Castle for their support and generosity sponsoring the Second Impact Concussion Seminar. And a thank you to all our guest speakers and to Dr. Jason Feinberg and Finger Lakes Health for their impeccable help in facilitating tonight's event. And a heartfelt thank you to my biggest supporter, my wife Patty, and she's endured and sacrificed so much and has never wavered even in the toughest of times, and believe me, they were meant. I could not possibly thank all the many supporters that have made the Second Impact a viable contender in the fight for concussion awareness. The tremendous support here tonight gives me the peace of mind that together, all of us here, can make the difference. And I'm going to bring you back some 45 years with documented segments of head trauma that I experienced throughout my boxing career. But off script here for a minute, this is not the speech that I give to the student athletes. Tonight I have the professionals here, and I'm going to get right to the crux of the matter. Through these segments, I intend to establish an appreciation for how far we've progressed in the awareness, prevention, and management of sports-related concussions. And I also hope to expose some of the thought process behind a determined athlete and the destructive influence of peer pressure. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a former middleweight boxer and member of the Rochester Boxing Hall of Fame. In a career that spanned close to a decade, 66 through 74, I've never been knocked down. Every fight was a war, and I always prided myself in facing top-ranked fighters, which included several U.S. and Canadian national champions. My only regret as a boxer was that I didn't defeat my toughest opponent, and that opponent was a concussion. For many years, I've been battling dementia pugilistica, also known as chronic traumatic encephalopathy and Parkinson's syndrome. And these progressive disorders are the direct result of my not addressing concussions properly as a young boxer. The consequences of my actions have so deeply affected my life. I endorse playing all sports. Through my story, my goal was to educate athletes about the life-altering mistakes that I made with the hope that no one will suffer the same fate as me. Now, I take full responsibility for all of my actions and decisions as a former boxer. I blame no one but myself for the resulting complications, and therefore, I respectfully omit all names of doctors and boxing promoters from my presentation. My desire to become a boxer began in 1957. I was 6 years old, hanging out in my grandparents' Italian restaurant here in Geneva. I didn't have much home supervision because the restaurant business was so time demanding on my family. It was a Friday night and the bar room was packed with patrons to watch a Gillette Friday night fight on the large black and white television above the bar. Middleweight champion Carmen Basilio was fighting, and I watched as the crowd roared at every punch Carmen threw. That night made such an impression on me that after the fight I ran in the back room and I filled up a laundry bag with linens and started using it as a punching bag. My grandmother came in and asked me what I was doing, and I told her, "Grandma, I'm Carmen Basilio." And she said, "Raymond, there's only one Carmen Basilio. Never mind that boxing. You better go to college. I'll get back in the bar room and help your grandfather." The rest is history. I got my first exposure to organized boxing at the young age of 14. And by the age of 16, a junior in high school, I had everything going for me. I was a well-behaved honor student, and as a boxer, I had a projected bright future in the ring. But one night during a bout at Memorial Auditorium in Buffalo, I caught a right hook to the back of my head. There was no knockdown, but I was temporarily dazed. I had never experienced this feeling before. I fought through it and won a unanimous decision. The next day, I developed a headache and slight fatigue. And these symptoms were both of a moderate degree, so I passed it off as just being physically run down from the night before, from that tough bout the night before. And I had previously signed to fight again in 1 week at the Syracuse War Memorial. I didn't want to miss this opportunity, so I resumed training, even though I still had a persistent headache and felt fatigue. I should have gotten medical attention, but I just didn't think it was that serious. Little did I know, this was the beginning of all my troubles. The headache and fatigue hampered my training all that week. And during the bout in Syracuse, I felt slow. I wasn't as sharp as usual. And sure enough, in the first round, I got my bell rung for the second time in 1 week. There was no knockdown, but I was dazed. Between rounds, when I returned to my corner for instruction, I felt nauseated and I vomited in the corner water bucket. And I was in a fog, and so I relied on my boxing instinct to go the distance, but I lost a close decision. I was in such a daze, I didn't realize I had lost until a sports reporter interviewed me after the fight in the dressing room. Then the headache intensified, the fog and fatigue worsened. Suddenly, my life changed. From a well-behaved honor student, I started missing school, sleeping in class, and failing all my courses. The headaches and fatigue persisted, and I was in a constant fog, and I had trouble concentrating. Reading and retaining information always came easy for me, but now I became exhausted after reading only one page and had trouble remembering what I had read. And then I slept excessively, sometimes 14 hours a day. I started having behavioral problems, and I couldn't explain why. I then developed a disdain for authority, especially toward police officers and teachers. And, you know, the teachers complained that I had a bad attitude when they questioned my behavior, and I became agitated. No one had any idea what was causing my sudden change in grades and behavior. I failed my senior year of high school because of low test scores, poor performance, and tardiness. And today, I firmly believe in my heart that I was suffering from second impact syndrome, a condition no one knew existed at that time. Second impact syndrome is when an athlete who has already sustained a concussion sustains a second concussion before symptoms from the first injury are properly healed, which carries with it a high risk of permanent brain damage and in some cases can be fatal. In my opinion, the concussion that exhibits mild symptoms can potentially be the most dangerous. When the symptoms are mild, you are more apt to think it's not that serious, not report it, and try to play through it. It puts you at risk for second impact syndrome. This is how I was fooled into making some bad decisions. Back then, there was little known about concussions or the dangers of not addressing them properly. The symptoms of the first concussion were mild, which fooled me into thinking it wasn't that serious. And I didn't know the possible consequences of ignoring the symptoms of a concussion. And during a training session at the gym, I asked a couple of the old-time boxers for advice. I said, you know, I've been having these headaches and I feel tired. Right then, one of the old-timers jumped up and quit. Son, headaches are a part of this game. You have to deal with them to get to the next level. You have all the ability to get to the top. You have to be able to dish it out and take it too in the sport. Gut it up. If not, this game's not for you. Oh, your comments hit me hard. More than anything else, I wanted to be like middleweight champion Carmen De Silva. I was determined to gut it out. Don't get me wrong, the old-timers were not intentionally giving me bad advice. They just didn't know any better at the time. And the headaches did seem to lose intensity between fights, which led me to believe that headaches were just part of the game, part of the fight game, and would clear up when I retired from boxing. And the belief back then was you had to get knocked unconscious to get a concussion. Well, I had never been knocked out or even knocked down in my entire career. And then I received the Golden Glove Heart Award, which is given to the boxer showing the most outstanding determination and resiliency. But that award gave me the false impression that I was invincible. And then instead of seeking professional help for my symptoms, I foolishly resorted to self-remedies. I was looking for a little help to mask the symptoms, as I still thought they were only temporary. For the chronic fatigue, I took excessive amounts of vitamin B complex and low dose for more energy. I took high doses of aspirin to take the edge off the headaches, especially on fight night. But the high doses of aspirin upset my stomach. So I guzzled Pepto-Bismol to remedy the stomach aches. And now I was making a real tangled web for myself. During a bout at Memorial Auditorium in Buffalo, midway through the fourth round, I got a cut above my right eye. The high doses of aspirin that I was taking came back to haunt me. It thinned my blood and made the cut bleed more than normal. I had the best cut man in the business working my corner, but he just couldn't stop the wound from bleeding, which prompted the ring doctor to stop the fight before the beginning of the fifth round with me well ahead on points. I beat myself that night. I was determined not to let a headache keep me from getting to the top. I still believed that headaches were part of the game that would go away when I retired from boxing. You know, I worked so hard to get to that level. I didn't want to lose my rank, and I thought boxing was my whole life. I continued self-medicating, training, and taking bouts without missing a heartbeat until 1970, when I decided to seek the help of a highly regarded Rochester neurologist. The evaluation consisted of x-rays, blood analysis, spinal tap, electrocephalogram, and a consultation session. I think we're there. The neurologist's 1970 evaluation letter displayed on the screen states, I could not find any abnormality on neurological examination. The patient's history certainly suggests repeated head trauma and some concussion. I'm actually surprised at the degree of abnormality of the electrocephalogram, but this can probably be considered consistent with head trauma. I could not elicit any suggestion of seizure problem. I tried to suggest to this patient that he might be able to find some better way to build up his muscles without injuring his brain, but I'm not sure that I was persuasive enough. Well, in defense of the doctor, she wasn't persuasive enough because she didn't have the technology and research studies like we have today. And during our conversation, the doctor spoke of letters she had written to Congress and to the New York State Boxing Commission, condemning the sport of boxing for being poorly regulated and supervised. I became defensive, and I got the impression she was just anti-boxing. I decided to continue my boxing career. A little over a year later, and several bouts later, the headaches and fog were taking its toll. My reflexes had slowed slightly, and to compensate, I was muscling my opponents rather than relying on my boxing ability. My tenacious and aggressive style also suffered. The headaches would intensify with exertion. So I was doing just enough to win. And I was still winning, but not winning in convincing fashion like before. No one understood that a concussion is an invisible injury. There are no crutches, no swelling, no stitches, or any other visual signs of injury. It is the unseen and the unknown that causes the concussed athlete to be vulnerable for negative remarks and peer pressure, which can push an athlete into returning to competition before they properly heal. What I found most troubling was trying to convince the skeptics and the critics that what I was going through was real. I had to counterpunch hurtful remarks to some question if I had lost the eye of the tiger. And some even had the audacity to question if my heart was still in the game. The same boxer that won the Golden Glove Heart Award was now having his heart questioned. They had no idea the hurt going on inside my head. And never underestimate the powerful influence of peer pressure. These negative remarks fueled my bad decisions to get it out. I then accepted an offer to lead New York State and continue my boxing career. In 1972, I returned to New York to have the evaluation and EEG test repeated by the same neurologist in hopes of improved results, even though my episodes of forgetfulness were getting were getting more frequent, and my headaches were still persistent. The neurologist's 1972 evaluation letter displayed on the screen states, "The neurological examination does not reveal any abnormality. Complete mental status examination not done. The patient appears to be somewhat slow in his mentation, but is fully oriented. The electrocephalogram was grossly abnormal and consistent with cortical dysfunction. There is suggestion of left posterior abnormality. The patient has probably had numerous injuries to the head, but the current symptoms which he describes may have to be investigated further if they persist or become more localized." Now, it was very hard for me to make the decision to walk away from my lifelong dream of becoming middleweight champion. I had never taken time off. You know, I was so dedicated, I never missed one day of training, not one day. So I decided to take some time off to see if the symptoms would clear up. And after a layoff of several months, the symptoms didn't go away. I then realized these conditions might be permanent, and I wasn't going to be the middleweight champion. In early 1974, I reluctantly hung up the gloves. I became depressed and gave away or threw out all of my memorabilia that I worked so hard for. I just threw it all out. And suddenly thereafter, upon taking the advice of my general practitioner, I voluntarily admitted myself for evaluation at the Clifton Springs Mental Health Clinic. Displayed on the screen is the bill for that evaluation. Yeah. But I spent 10 days in the clinic before leaving against medical advice. They diagnosed me with severe depression. I was living in denial and I didn't want to accept that answer. I refused to take prescribed medication or get suggested counseling. When I decided it was time to move on, I accepted I wasn't going to be the middleweight champion and began pursuing another aspiration. I wanted to become a physical education teacher. In 1975, I failed my first semester of college. Those concentration problems prevented me from retaining information. That was another big disappointment. I then landed a job in the research department at Eastman Kodak in Rochester, and you know, I seemed to be holding my own. But several years later, I developed hand tremors and started dropping chemicals. The dementia and forgetfulness worsened, and I was forgetting important segments of my job. In 1994, after extensive testing at the University of Rochester Medical Center, I was diagnosed with dementia pugilistica and was forced to retire at the age of 44. After many years of battling depression and seclusion, I came out fighting, because that's what I do. And the only gain that I could make from this lifetime of pain was to do everything that I could to prevent another unknowing athlete from going down the same path of destruction. I knew where I went wrong, and I understood all too well the mindset of athletes, as determination and desire can sometimes override common sense and logic. I knew concussion awareness education was the key. I started out by writing letters of caution for more concussion education to the NFL and NCAA. With a lack of response and support from these major organizations, I took it upon myself to establish this Second Impact Concussion Awareness Program, which consisted of an information website and free speaking engagements at high schools and colleges. addressing student athletes and parents about the importance of honesty about symptoms and the possible repercussions of not addressing a concussion properly. The website continues to garner national attention, and the demand for speaking appearances have been overwhelming, and we stopped counting at the 100 mark in 2012. Again, also gaining in popularity are requests from colleges and universities to address physical therapy, athletic trainer, and medical students, as well as the facilitation of educational seminars such as tonight's. I felt adamant about the urgent need to have a state law, and that was comprehensive across the board for all schools to follow the same rules for addressing concussion awareness and management. Senator Nozzolio accomplished that need by getting passed into law the 2011 Concussion Management Awareness Act. And during the legislation process, Assemblyman Brian Coleman was instrumental in guiding the bill through the Assembly segment. Again, this law drastically reduces the chance that a concussed athlete will be mistakenly overlooked. And again, I couldn't be more happy that many other states have used this law as a blueprint to enact their own legislation. You know, and public speaking was not my forte. I was a fighter. So I sought the help of another good friend and my former general practitioner, Dr. Jason Feinberg. His guidance and encouragement were instrumental in giving me the direction I needed to get started, as he even took many days away from himself and his family to assist me on several initial speaking appearances. Thank you. I then needed to establish a 501c3 nonprofit status for the Second Impact, for which I turned to two longtime friends, attorney Michael Rowland and CPA Bruce Johnson, and to see this nonprofit come to fruition. I have been under the watchful eye of my neurologist, Dr. Heidi Schwartz, since 1994, and she has managed my dementia, depression, and Parkinson's tremors with precision. Her impeccable care is directly responsible for slowing the progression of these disorders. I owe her a lot. I have recently been contacted. I have recently been contacted by the Boston University School of Medicine Center for the Study of Chronic Traumatic Encephalopathy. Displayed on the screen is the initial letter. I have signed the formal papers to donate my brain to their registry for CTE research upon my death. I have also agreed to participate in several CTE research studies they are conducting at the Boston University School of Medicine. I have shared with them what it's like for me living with these progressive disorders. And my life now consists of not what I want to do, but what I'm capable of doing. I'm very restricted. I've had a headache every day since I was 16. I'm now 62. For many years I slept excessively. Now I struggle to get 3 hours of sleep a day. And the tremors. I used to be so ashamed of my hands trembling that when I went out in public, I would sit on my hands to hide them from shaking. I don't hide anything anymore. It is what it is. And the dementia. I live with this constant fog. And I battle it every day. And I have good days and bad days. On good days like today, I can function fairly well for short periods of time. The medication adjustments with the consent of my doctor enable me to be more audible during this period. But on bad days, I struggle to tie my shoes, and I forget the names of lifelong friends. And this is so frustrating and demoralizing. And on bad days, I'm restricted to the house. And my family sacrifices so much on my behalf, and I struggle with that guilt. On those bad days when I'm restricted, I not only miss family and friends' functions, but so does my wife, or she must attend alone. And my dedication to the Second Impact, along with the support and understanding of my good friends and family, keeps me from heading back down the road of depression and seclusion. I often think about my good friend, former heavyweight champion Floyd Patterson. Floyd's struggle with dementia pugilistica was highly publicized before this disorder claimed his life. But I also think about the many unknown fighters like myself. And I also, with many unknown fighters that have also gone down this road that no one ever hears about. And one of the hardest conditions for me to accept is being stripped of privileges for my own well-being and the well-being of others. I was frustrated when I had my driving and hiking privileges restricted because of memory lapses. But what really hit me the hardest was knowing that I can't take my granddaughter for walks or care for her unsupervised. This is the grim reality of more restrictions to come. I've had 40 years to ponder where I went wrong. And I always come back to the same conclusion. I challenged a concussion, and I got beat. It cost me my quality of life and my future potential. I threw a whole career away for the sake of not missing one fight. What a foolish mistake. I didn't have the benefit of concussion education, but now I'm so grateful that the word is out and the help is there for athletes to make the right choice. And I can tell you, there is no amount of fortune or fame that is worth the risk of the final price tag that a permanent brain injury carries with it. Now, if I had it all to do over again, I would still pursue a boxing career, absolutely. I would still compete with the same tenacity and dedication that it takes to be a champion. The only thing that I would do differently is that I would immediately get medical attention for any symptoms of injury that my body was warning me to address. In all probability, I wouldn't be standing here talking to you tonight if I had addressed my first concussion properly. Thank you.
What a wonderful talk Ray just gave us. I know he's come a long way, right? You keep punching and you keep going. And I think out of something tragic in your life, I think you've come a long way, and bringing this message out today is your purpose. And I think we're all grateful for you bringing that, your dedication to this awareness of concussion management. I don't think we'd be here in this room today necessarily if it wasn't for Ray's persistent in getting that ball over the goal line, like the senator said earlier. Great job, and I think we're going to move on to our keynote speaker tonight. Dr. Bazarian is ready for this. Dr. Bazarian is an emergency physician with active interdisciplinary sports concussion clinical research at Rochester. We met for the first time tonight, but he's been active with folks and the physicians in the Finger Lakes, and he's a great resource to us when we have an injured patient, an injured person, a child. He does have an active clinical practice in concussion management. I'm going to let you listen to him, as he is one of the leaders in concussion research, and he's going to talk to you about the latest and greatest concussions. And it's our pleasure. Please, a warm welcome for Dr. Jeff Bazarian.
Well, I think I'll have to move out from behind that podium because I can't see my slides. I don't like Ray, who obviously has all the slides memorized. I don't have my slides memorized. But I have to say, Ray, every time I hear you speak, I say, why bother having me come up to speak after you speak? That was just such an amazing talk that I feel like I need to give you a round of applause.